Welcome dear learners of Standard 9. It's a very good morning and welcome back to my today's online class. Previous day I had discussed with you about the diurnal motion of the earth. Today I am going to discuss on the annual motion. So annual motion of earth. You know, the earth moves round the sun continuously on its own axis through a certain semicircular orbit, to a certain direction and in a certain duration. And such rotation of earth to the west from the east is called the annual motion. You have noticed here that the time of different days and nights in the year have difference. That is, sometimes days are longer and sometimes nights are longer. And have you ever thought on how it differentiates? It can be replied that such disparity occurs due to annual motion of the earth, and an annual motion causes day and night and season change occurs. So we can say the effect of annual motion, there are major two effects of annual motion: increase or decrease of length of day and night, and another one is change of season. So let us have a look to this following figure. While moving round the sun, the 4 stages of the earth have been specified in the orbit, such as this is 21st June, then 23rd September, 22nd December and 21st March. So we are observing here the 4 stages of the earth. Now I will discuss the decrease, increase or decrease of length of day and night occurs due to annual motion, and simultaneously season change occur. So in the world here 4 types of seasons I will tell you, that is about summer, winter, autumn and spring. First of all, follow what happened. The earth having a full rotation on her axis for 24 hours. It is the diurnal motion. Simultaneously moves round the sun on a set route on the elliptical orbit, that is orbit once in a year, and it takes this movement of the earth is known as the annual motion. And for this annual motion, the earth takes 365 days and 6 hours to revolve around the sun in her orbit. So the period the earth takes to complete the revolution is known as the solar year. Next follow, you know about the equator, and this equator divides our earth into 2 hemispheres. From the equator up to North Pole it is the northern hemisphere, and from the equator up to South Pole it is the southern hemisphere. So in northern hemisphere we live in the northern hemisphere, and you know the Tropic of Cancer passes through our country, through Bangladesh. So we are living in the northern hemisphere, eastern part. Now follow, we live in northern hemisphere and Bangladesh comes closer to the sun on the 21st June. That means sun on the day of 21st June, the sun gives the perpendicular heat on the Tropic of Cancer, and as the Tropic of Cancer is situated in the northern hemisphere and Tropic of Cancer passes through Bangladesh, so Bangladesh comes closer, that means Bangladesh comes closer to the sun on the 21st June. So at that time we find the sun above our head, and so on 21st June is the longest day and shortest night in the northern hemisphere. And follow about the summer solstice. You know about solstice. Sol means sun and stis means stand still, and about this figure and the names you know. Now the summer solstice, also known as the estival solstice or midsummer, occurs when one of the earth's poles has its maximum tilt towards the sun. So solstice, actually I told you, that is in the northern hemisphere solstice on 21st June follow from the Arctic circle up to North Pole, that means 66.5 degree up to 90 degree experiences these countries the summer solstice, and it happens twice yearly. And here is the winter solstice, once in each hemisphere. It happens twice yearly, once in each hemisphere. For that hemisphere, the summer solstice is when the sun reaches its highest most position in the sky and is the day with the longest period of daylight. Within the Arctic Circle or Antarctic Circle, there is continuous daylight around the summer solstice. Then what about the winter solstice? Himal solstice or hibernal solstice occurs when one of the Earth's poles has its maximum tilt away from the sun, and it happens twice yearly also, once in each hemisphere, so northern and southern hemisphere. For that hemisphere, the winter solstice is the day with the shortest period of daylight and longest night of the year, when the sun is at its lowest daily maximum elevation in the sky. So in the winter, that means in the northern hemisphere, from the Arctic Circle up to North Pole is the summer solstice on the day of 21st June, whereas in the southern hemisphere from the Antarctic Circle up to South Pole it is the winter solstice. So matter of solstice here completed. Now I will tell you about the 21st June. While moving around the sun, started the journey from here. While moving around the sun, the earth upon its course reaches at such a place on the orbit on 21st June where the North Pole mostly inclines towards the sun and the South Pole remains farthest away from the sun. On this day at noon, the sunlight falls over 23.5 degree north latitude lengthwise, and the day on this date becomes the longest in the north hemisphere and the night becomes shortest. And thus opposite situation exists in the southern hemisphere instead. That means in southern hemisphere the day will be shortest and the night will be longest. And next one, what happened? The duration of day and night is equal in both. While June 21st becomes over, the North Pole continues to move away from the sun and the South Pole continues to draw near gradually. Consequently, what happened? Day gradually becomes longer and night shorter in the north hemisphere, and in the southern hemisphere day gradually becomes longer and night shorter also. So that means the earth stays at such a place on 23rd September where both the poles remains equally away from the sun, and on this day the sunlight falls vertically or lengthwise towards the equator. So that means the duration of day and night is equal in both hemispheres of the earth on the day of 23rd September. And then over the equator the sun shines vertically and it is hot in the equator. As the duration of the day and night is equal in Bangladesh, it is neither hot nor cold in here. Then the southern hemisphere, the winter departs and the summer is coming. That is, it is spring here and autumn. That means it is spring here. Next one, on 22nd December. While 23rd September becomes over, the North Pole continues to move further away from the sun and rather the South Pole draws nearer. So consequently, the daytime gradually becomes shorter and night longer in northern hemisphere. That means a part of southern hemisphere remains facing the sun. That means sun gives the perpendicular heat on Tropic of Capricorn. Then the Bangladesh is far away from the sun. So in Bangladesh the day is short and the night is long. And the sun shines inclined at the south. So southern hemisphere day will be longest and night will be shortest. And the heat of the sun is less, and due to inclination, Bangladesh then it is winter season. That means on the day of 22nd December, as Bangladesh situated in the northern hemisphere and northern hemisphere far away from the sun, so northern hemisphere experience the winter, whereas the southern hemisphere experience the summer season. That means in Australia of southern hemisphere, and the day is long and the night is short and the sun shines vertically. Then it is summer in the southern hemisphere. What about on 21st March? Subsequently, after December 22nd, when the earth gets further ahead to its own orbit, the North Pole gradually draws nearer to the sun, whereas the South Pole moves away instead. For this reason, day continues to be longer and night shorter in the northern hemisphere. At last, on March 21st, the earth reaches at such a place on its own orbit where both the poles remain equally away from the sun, like 23rd September. So day and night will be equal. So the earth inclines facing the sun, and then the night and the day becomes equal over the globe. And this is why in our country the day and night are equal. At this time the weather is neither hot or nor cold, then it is spring in our country. So the 21st March, northern hemisphere, here is spring, and southern hemisphere autumn. And 23rd September, in northern hemisphere here is autumn, and southern hemisphere there will be spring. So the reasons for the change of seasons. What is the reason? Reason follow. While moving around the sun, the earth always rotates inclining at the angle of 66.5 degree due to annual motion, and the length of the orbit possesses a measure of 93 crore 80 lakh 51,827 kilometer. Since the orbit of the earth is elliptical in shape, while rotating, the distance of the earth from the sun does not always remain equal. So what happened? Follow. Here as the earth is elliptical, so sometimes we see the that means place of the earth and sun is not at the same distance. That means the angular disparity occurs in respect of dropping sun rays to different sides, and seasons get changed. And sometimes we see that distance of earth from the sun does not always remain equal. The sun stays closest to the earth during January 1st to 3rd January, which is called the earth's perihelion, and in other words the closest point to the sun in a planet's orbit is called the perihelion. That is, the position of the earth will be nearer to the sun. And similarly the sun, and similarly what happened? The sun stays remotest from the farthest away from the earth during July 1 to 4. It is called the earth aphelion. So in times earth perihelion occurs around January 3, and the aphelion occurs July 4. It is proved from the decrease and increase of the distance between the sun and the earth, and from the actual change of the relative volume. So from here it is proved that the earth orbit is elliptical in shape. So now we will know about perihelion and aphelion. The perihelion is the point in the orbit of a planet, asteroid or comet or other sun orbiting body where it is nearest to the sun. That means sun stays closest to the earth, and it is the opposite of aphelion, which is the point where the orbit of the object is farthest from the sun. The word perihelion stems from the Greek word peri means near and helios meaning the sun. Aphelion derives from the preposition apo meaning away, away of and apart. All planets, comets and asteroids in our solar system have approximately elliptical orbits. Thus, they all have a closest and farthest point from the sun. A perihelion and an aphelion known collectively as apsides. An orbital eccentricity measures the flatness of the orbit. So Earth comes closest to the sun every year around 3rd January, and it is farthest from the sun every year around 4th July. So dear learners, hope that you have understood and you learned this annual motion also when you were the students of standard 7. So thank you all. To stop COVID-19, stay home and stay safe.